During the 12th birthday celebration for the twins, the boys mysteriously died. Unable to cope, their mother also collapsed lifelessly onto the floor. But at the moment of the funeral, as the sealed casket was lowered into the grave, a shocking detail emerged, revealing the cause of the sudden deaths of the three, leaving everyone horrified. "Look, they brought the cake," Abigail's mother announced cheerfully. Abigail walked through the room, smiling, carefully carrying a large, vibrant cake. It was adorned with details from Super Mario, the favorite character of her twins, Kevin and Kyle. This celebration was special. The boys were turning 12. To their mother, they meant everything. Her heart beat for them. With love, she placed the cake on the table. As soon as she did, the two boys ran up and stood behind the table, excited, ready for the happy birthday moment. Their eyes sparkled with joy. Abigail smiled, moved.ms. Victoria, Abigail's mother and the boys' grandmother, appeared beside her with a lighter in hand and lit the 12 candles one by one, symbolizing each year of the boys' lives. Finishing, she glanced at Michael, Abigail's husband, and the boy's father, and gave him a thumbs up. He understood the cue and turned off the lights in the room. Instantly, the room filled with the singing of Happy Birthday. It was the sound of a happy family. Kevin and Kyle smiled as if it were the best day of their lives. Abigail's eyes filled with quiet tears of pure joy. They loved celebrations, and she loved seeing them like this. When the candles were blown out, each boy closed his eyes and made a wish. Then, Abigail helped cut the first piece of cake. "Now, who gets the first slice?" she asked with a smile. The twins glanced at each other, laughed, and simultaneously stretched out their hands, pointing at Victoria. "Grandma," they said in unison. Victoria covered her mouth with her hand, surprised. "Oh, my darlings," she whispered, touched. But deep down, no one was surprised. It was obvious how much they loved her, and she was the grandmother who was always there. Abigail crossed her arms and pretended to be offended. "Oh, and what about me?" she asked in a playful tone. Kyle quickly replied, hugging his mother, "You get the second piece." Kevin added, "And second isn't worse than first, Mom." Abigail laughed, hugging them both. Michael came over, hugged his sons, and smiled too. Everything seemed perfect. The party continued like any children's birthday. Colorful balloons, running kids, adults chatting, background music, a typical happy day. But no one knew they were living the final minutes of this apparent normality. Shortly after everyone had tried the cake, getting ready for the next activity, Kevin approached his mother. "Mom, I feel sick," he said, gasping. "I'm having trouble breathing." Abigail immediately knelt, worried. "What do you mean, son? Where does it hurt?" she asked, holding his face in her hands. But before he could answer, his body gave a slight shudder, and the next moment, he collapsed onto the floor. It seemed like a faint, but something was wrong. The thud drew everyone's attention. Victoria rushed towards him in horror. Michael, who was further away drinking beer with guests, also hurried to his son. "My God, what's wrong with him?" Victoria cried, kneeling beside her grandson. Abigail tried to bring Kevin around. Son, talk to me," she yelled desperately, gently shaking the boy. At that moment, Kyle, standing beside his brother and holding his hand, began to lose his balance. "Mom," he uttered in a weak voice. Abigail turned sharply and saw her second son staggering too. "Kyle!" she screamed. The boy collapsed next to his brother. Abigail's head spun. She grabbed her head, not understanding what was happening. "Michael, we need to get them to the hospital urgently," she cried out in despair. The father picked Kevin up in his arms. Abigail bent down to pick up Kyle, but before she could, she felt a weakness overcome her body. A tightness gripped her chest. Breathing became difficult, the same pain, the same lack of air, the same terror. "No, what's happening?" she whispered before collapsing strengthlessly onto the floor beside her sons. Silence enveloped the room for a few seconds, then screams erupted. Victoria shrieked and rushed to her daughter, falling to her knees beside her. She sobbed, "Abigail, talk to me. Oh God, someone do something." The guests were in shock, paralyzed. No one understood how 3 people could die so suddenly simultaneously. Victoria pleaded for help. "Someone help me lift my daughter and my grandson. We need to get them to the hospital now." Just then Michael, still holding Kevin, touched his son's neck. He's cold," he stammered, his voice trembling. One of the guests, a nurse, came forward and checked the boy's pulse, then the other too. Her face paled. "They have no pulse." "None of the 3, she said, her eyes filling with tears. "Are you sure?" the father asked, as if refusing to believe it. She swallowed hard. "I'm so sorry." They're gone." Those words hit like an explosion. Michael froze. Victoria screamed and fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. She leaned over her daughter's body. "No, no. My daughter, my grandsons. Please don't do this to me." "Why? Why?" she cried out. The people around remained motionless, trying to process what had happened. A moment that began as a celebration had turned into an indescribable nightmare. Kevin and Kyle's 12th birthday became the day when, as everyone believed, a mother and her 2 children lost their lives without any explicable reason. Later that day, at the cemetery, a heart-wrenching atmosphere prevailed. Grief hung thick and silent in the air like a gray cloud. A casket was placed under a white tent, but even the sunlight couldn't warm the place. Relatives wept quietly, friends hugged in sorrow, and sheer disbelief permeated the air. Before them stood a single casket, unusually large, bigger than standard ones. Inside lay 3 bodies: Abigail and her sons, Kevin and Kyle. Mother and twins, together as they were in life, now united in death. People stared in shock. No one could accept how such a thing was possible, how a mother and 2 children could die simultaneously in the middle of a party. Someone whispered conjectures. "Maybe something wasn't fresh," one woman said to her husband. "Poisoning," suggested another, unsure if it made sense. "But why only the 3 of them?" "Everyone ate that cake," added a young man, frowning. Despite the rumors, the medical conclusion was clear. All 3 had suffered cardiac arrest, one after another, almost simultaneously, a nearly impossible medical coincidence. But for those present, it was the only explanation. Some said Kyle couldn't bear his brother's death and died of a broken heart. Others thought Abigail, seeing both sons collapse, experienced such an intense emotional shock that her body couldn't handle it. Similar cases had occurred after profound losses, but 3 at once? It was strange, unbearable. The shared casket also drew attention. It was unusual, but there was a reason behind it.ms. Victoria, the grandmother, had insisted. She organized the funeral meticulously, even while heartbroken. When asked if she wanted 3 separate caskets, she refused immediately. She found an oversized casket, typically used for very tall or large individuals, and insisted her daughter and grandsons be placed inside together. They didn't want to be separated in life, she explained, her voice trembling. I want to separate them now. Soon, the priest arrived, an elderly man with moist eyes. He knew the family well, especially Abigail. I knew Abigail since she was young. She was a woman of faith, devoted to God and love for her neighbor. How many times did she come to church with these boys, always smiling, always resilient, he said tenderly, looking at the casket. He tried to comfort the grieving. Sometimes life sends trials that seem cruel, but God makes no mistakes. Even if it hurts, even if it seems unjust, we must believe there is a higher purpose. Their peace now is greater than any of our pain. MS. Victoria stood by the casket, stroking her daughter's hair, adjusting Kevin's bangs, straightening Kyle's shirt collar, as if she could care for them even in this final moment. Michael stood beside her silently, his eyes red and deep. He had cried a lot in the first hours, but now he was quiet. He stared as if his mind was still trying to grasp the tragedy. After a few minutes, the funeral director quietly approached the priest and whispered something. The priest nodded, took a deep breath, and announced, "It is time for the farewell." One by one, those present approached the casket. Some whispered something. Some simply touched the wood and moved on. Many cried. Some couldn't speak. Michael slowly approached, stopped before his wife and children, looked at them, ran his hand over their faces. Not a word, just a silent goodbye.ms. Victoria was the last. She wiped her tears with a white handkerchief, took her daughter's hand one last time, and whispered firmly, "This is not goodbye, just until we meet again. One day, we will see each other again." With those words, the casket was closed. Soon, at the cemetery, the casket was lowered into the grave. As it touched the bottom, several people threw white roses, Abigail's favorite flowers. Then began the hardest part, the final farewell. The sound of earth falling onto the casket echoed around .ms. Victoria held on with her last strength, each layer of soil pressed down on her soul. When the grave was completely filled, Michael approached his mother-in-law. He looked more devastated than ever. His eyes, previously full of pain, now seemed empty. "I don't understand. I can't accept this." They were healthy. They were happy. How did this happen, MS? Victoria? His voice was barely audible. She took a deep breath, looked at the fresh grave. "It's God's will, Michael. We won't understand now, maybe never. But He knows what He's doing, even if it hurts." And then she couldn't hold back, bursting into tears, clutching her chest. Michael hugged her, trying to comfort her. Victoria returned the hug, but her body was tense, as if something troubled her. They exchanged a look. In that moment, there was something strange, something unspoken. As darkness began to fall, people started to leave. Michael was heading to his car when Victoria caught up with him. "Can I ride with you?" she asked. "I want to stop by the house, pick up a few things of Abigail's and the boys, just for remembrance." Michael nodded. "Of course, take whatever you want." And they headed together towards the house where the family had lived, where the scent of childhood still lingered, where everything still seemed alive. Meanwhile, in the quiet cemetery, fresh earth marked the recently filled grave. No grass, no flowers, just emptiness. But was this truly the end for Abigail and her children? Several hours later, night had fully descended, covering the sky with a dark, heavy blanket. The scarce light from the cemetery lamps cast trembling shadows among the tombstones, creating a silent and gloomy picture. Only the sound of the wind and the rustling of leaves broke the deep silence of this place. In a small guardhouse in the corner of the cemetery, the night guard, Charles, was on duty. He sat on an old wooden chair, squinting, monitoring the area through cameras. As usual, nothing suspicious was happening. Nights at the cemetery were always calm, long, and lonely. He had long grown accustomed to it. However, on this night, something utterly unusual happened. Not before his eyes, but deep underground, in that freshly filled grave where the oversized casket lay, the casket holding the bodies of Abigail and her sons, Kevin and Kyle. Inside the casket, something stirred. Abigail's body slowly began to move. First, her fingers twitched, then her hands, and suddenly, she opened her eyes. For a few seconds, she was disoriented. Darkness surrounded her. A hard surface lay beneath her. The air was stale. "Where am I?" she whispered, still not fully conscious. She tried to sit up and hit her head. The hard wooden surface above confirmed the worst. This wasn't a bed, not home. It was a box, a closed box. She felt the walls of the casket, trying to understand. Then, reaching out her hand, she felt someone's body. "My sons? Oh my God!" she whispered in horror. Despair washed over her. "Help! Somebody! Let us out!" she screamed, but her voice was muffled, absorbed by the wood and earth. No one would hear. She shook Kevin, then Kyle. "Wake up, my boys. Please wake up." Miraculously, they began to show signs of life. First, they opened their eyes, then moved weakly, finally speaking, still confused. "Mom, where are we?" Kyle asked fearfully. "It's so dark here," Kevin mumbled. "I'm scared." Abigail tried to contain her panic. She didn't want to frighten the children further, though she herself didn't understand what was happening. "Quiet, quiet, my darlings. Mom will get you out of here, I promise." She reached into her pocket and, surprised, found her phone there. Quickly, she pulled it out and pressed the power button. The screen lit up, but there was no signal. However, on the home screen was a video labeled, "Watch Me." With trembling hands, she paused for a second. "Mom, I want to get out of here," Kevin cried, trembling. "There's not much air. It's hard to breathe," Kyle added. "It's going to be okay, I'm with you," she said, trying to stay calm, though she didn't believe it herself. She tapped the video. The recording showed a casket, exactly like theirs. Inside, Beneath the woman's body, a compartment was revealed containing a metal cylinder and 3 oxygen masks. Abigail's breathing quickened. Then, a person appeared on the screen, wearing a mask that concealed their face. The voice was distorted. "I see. The air will run out soon. Put on the masks. Everything will be fine." Abigail understood. They had been buried alive. Who? Why? She looked at her sons, waiting for an explanation. "Put these on now," she said, handing them the masks. "Mom, were we buried?" Kyle asked tearfully. "No. I mean, yes, but well, get out. Trust me." She put the masks on the children, then on herself, feeling fresh air begin to flow through the tube. She tried to remember the birthday. The children feeling unwell. The chest pain. And then, nothingness. Meanwhile, outside, the guard Charles watched the monitors. A white van appeared at the cemetery gates. He stood up, walked over to the security system, and without hesitation, turned it off. "It's time," he muttered, returning to his seat as if nothing had happened. The van drove silently onto the grounds. 3 masked men got out, carrying tools and flashlights. They silently approached Abigail's fresh grave. "Dig here," ordered the one who seemed to be the leader. And they began. Inside the casket, Abigail heard the sounds of earth being shoveled away. Her heart pounded wildly. She squeezed her son's hands tighter. "They're digging. We're going to be saved," she whispered through tears. Kevin cried quietly. Kyle trembled, but now a spark of hope flickered in their eyes. Then, a loud thud as shovel hit the casket. Abigail held her breath. The lid was opened. The beam of a flashlight hit her eyes. She blinked, trying to adjust to the brightness. But when she saw the 3 masked men, relief turned to terror. No words, no explanations. The nightmare was just beginning. Abigail jumped up as soon as the casket was opened, tore the mask from her face, and stared wide-eyed at the strangers. "Who are you?" she cried, her voice still weak but full of desperation. "What's going on? Why did you bury us?" The children huddled against her, trembling. Kevin wrapped his arms around his mother's shoulders. Kyle pressed close to her. Abigail, horrified, grabbed her phone. "I'm calling the police right now. And my husband too." But before she could do anything, one of the men sharply snatched the phone from her hand. He looked at her coldly from behind the mask. "You won't be calling anyone," the man said firmly. The leader of the group, standing slightly behind, stepped forward and spoke in a low, menacing tone. "You better keep quiet. Do as we say, or you'll go back in the casket, along with them." Abigail felt a chill run down her spine. She looked at her children, then at the 3 men. She took a deep, shaky breath. Okay. They'll do whatever you want. Just please don't hurt my children," she pleaded, holding the boys tightly. The leader nodded. "Nobody here wants to hurt anyone. Just do as we say." They were carefully helped into the van. Abigail and the children sat on the back seats. Outside, the other 2 masked men closed the grave again, as if nothing had happened. The van started moving in silence, leaving the cemetery behind. The road was dark, surrounded by trees. Inside the van, the atmosphere was heavy. Kevin asked in a trembling voice, "Mom, what's happening?" Kyle looked at her, with the same fear in his eyes. "Why did they bury us?" Abigail took their hands and tried to force a smile. "Let's pretend this is all an adventure, okay? Everything will be alright in the end, I promise." But inside, her heart screamed. Who were these people? How did my children and I end up in that grave? Everyone thinks we're dead. And Michael? Does he know? Or is he somehow involved in all this? No, Michael mustn't know anything. God, what is going on? She thought. After a few minutes, the van stopped at a simple house, far from everything. The masked men led them into a small room with wooden walls and a single bed. Abigail took a deep breath, gathered her courage, and asked, "If you need money, I can transfer it right now. My husband will pay any amount. Just don't hurt me or my children." The leader looked at her and shook his head. "We don't need money. You'll understand everything soon. Just be patient. When the right person arrives, everything will become clear." Abigail's eyes widened. The right person? Who? Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Ms. Victoria was still at her daughter's house. She carefully gathered Abigail's clothes, her grandson's toys, family photos. Michael sat on the couch, face buried in his hands. He was crying, or at least pretending to. "I'm leaving now, Michael," the woman said. "I've taken everything I need." The man looked up, his eyes supposedly full of tears. "I still can't believe it," he said, sniffling. "Abigail. The boys." He stood up. "Can I give you a hug?" "Ms." Victoria nodded. He hugged her tightly. "You were like a mother to me. You could always count on me, and you always will." The woman paused slightly, then replied, "You can count on me too." Then she stepped back. "But I need to go now. I need to be alone, talk to God, ask Him to accept my daughter and my grandsons." Michael nodded, respecting her farewell. The woman left the house. But as she reached her car, she glanced back one more time at the living room window where Michael still stood motionless. She shook her head and muttered, "Lying scoundrel." "Oh, Michael. But your time is near." She got into her car and drove away. Inside the house, the supposed widower wiped away his tears and immediately went to the bathroom. He washed his face, looked at himself in the mirror, and smiled. "I was born to be an actor," he said quietly. He took his phone from his pocket and dialed a number. "You can come over. I'm waiting." 15 minutes later, an expensive foreign car stopped in front of the house. A young, elegant woman in her early 20s got out. Well-kept hair, high heels, expensive perfume, Cynthia. She rang the doorbell, and Michael opened it with a smile. "Finally alone," he said, pulling her into a passionate kiss. Cynthia walked in as if she knew the place, went straight to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, took out a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. As she poured, she glanced at Michael out of the corner of her eye. "Now, tell me everything exactly as it is. Did you really get rid of your wife and kids? What poison did you use?" Michael calmly swirled the wine in his glass, then took a sip and answered with a smile. No. I wanted to. It was in the plans. But a higher power intervened. Cynthia frowned. What do you mean it wasn't you? No, he repeated, shaking his head. It might sound crazy, but I had nothing to do with it. If it were me, I would have done it differently. One by one, discreetly, without suspicion. She paused for a second, then laughed. So you fooled me too? I thought you poisoned them. I didn't even have to, he replied. But what matters is that I'm free now. Completely free. Now I can live how I want, with Abigail's money. And with you. Cynthia smiled a wide, cold, satisfied smile. You really are something. But now you're a millionaire something. And they clinked glasses. The man who had buried his family without even digging the grave now celebrated his supposed freedom. But he had no idea the story was just beginning. A little over an hour had passed since Abigail and the children were taken captive, locked in the simple room with cold wooden walls. Outside, the three masked men stood guard, while inside, she tried to understand what was happening, sitting with the children on her lap. Questions tormented her. Who did this to us? Why? Where are we? Do they think we're dead? The atmosphere was heavy, suffocating. Kevin and Kyle were calmer now, trusting their mother, but Abigail couldn't hide her fear. She looked at the masked men's faces, trying to recognize features, anything that would explain everything. Just then, the leader of the trio put his ear to the door and said, "She's here." Abigail's heart pounded. She? Who? Who is behind all this? Her body went cold. The door opened. The sound of women's heels clicking on the wooden floor echoed through the room, a rhythmic, confident sound. Abigail looked up and froze. It was her mother. Ms. Victoria entered with a calm expression, her hair neat, her face composed as always, but her gaze was intense. Abigail couldn't utter a word, just stared. The twins, however, jumped to their feet. "Grandma!" Both shouted simultaneously, running to her and hugging her tightly. Kyle spoke first. "Grandma, they buried us alive. And then these men brought us here." Kevin added excitedly, "But Mom said it was a mission, an adventure, and that everything would be okay." Ms. Victoria gently stroked both their heads. "And it's true, my darlings. This is a mission. The most important mission of your lives. You're participating in a secret mission." Kevin looked at her curiously. "You knew everything, Grandma?" She nodded with a slight smile. "I knew." Kyle asked next, "So you're part of the mission too?" Ms. Victoria looked into her grandson's eyes and answered firmly, "Yes. I'm with you." But Abigail was still silent. She slowly stood up and approached her mother. Her gaze was hard, tense. "What is this madness?" she asked, her voice strained. "What are you doing, Mom? What have you done to me and my children?" Victoria maintained her calm tone. "Daughter, try to calm down." "How do you expect me to calm down, Mom? We were buried alive. Do you understand what that means? I woke up in a casket with my children. This is insane." Abigail ran her hands through her hair nervously. "Where's Michael? Does he know about all this?" Is he behind this too? Victoria took a deep breath. Michael, your husband, and everyone else. Everyone thinks you're dead. That you and the boys are dead. Abigail's eyes widened. What? And you can't talk to him yet? What do you mean I can't? I want to talk to my husband right now. This is madness, Mom. Have you completely lost your mind? Victoria stepped closer and gently took her daughter's hand. I did this for you and the boys. Because I love you. Because you needed to know the truth. Abigail pulled away. The truth? What truth, Mom? That being buried alive is some kind of life lesson? You're crazy. Kevin and Kyle watched the argument with wide eyes. Kyle tugged at his mother's hand. Mommy, don't fight. It's a mission, remember? Victoria knelt and looked into the boy's eyes. Everything will be fine, my loves. I just need to talk to your mom for a bit, okay? She gestured, and one of the hooded men led the boys into another room. When the door closed, Victoria looked directly at Abigail. Now you will listen. Because it's time you found out who you really married. Abigail crossed her arms. You're completely out of your mind. Victoria took a phone from her pocket and, without a word, pressed play on a video. The image spoke for itself. Michael in their living room, kissing an unfamiliar woman, then clinking wine glasses and laughing. Finally free. Now I can live how I want. Abigail brought her hand to her mouth, shocked. No. This can't be. Victoria sat her down on the couch. Daughter, listen carefully. It's time to understand everything. Michael came into your life when you were particularly vulnerable. You were pregnant, scared. The man you truly loved had died without even knowing you were expecting twins. Abigail nodded silently, tears streaming down her cheeks. Despite the inheritance from your father, despite all the property, you wanted more than just security. You wanted the boys to have a father. Someone who would be there, someone loving. And then he appeared. Michael. Handsome, polite, full of promises. Victoria paused for a second, memories flooding back like a movie. And you believed him. Despite the differences, despite my warnings. You thought I was being critical out of bias or pride. But it wasn't that, daughter. It was intuition. From the very beginning, I saw only one thing in that man's eyes. He wanted your money. Abigail lowered her head, crying silently. I tried to warn you, but you pushed me away. You thought I wanted to control your life. So I waited. Waited for the right moment to prove everything. And that moment came. She handed the phone to her daughter. The video continued Michael with his mistress, kissing, laughing, toasting to freedom. He never loved you, Abigail. Never loved the boys. He was just waiting for an opportunity to get rid of you. And when that opportunity arose, he took it. Abigail whispered, barely audible, I trusted him. I gave him my life. Victoria took her hand. And now, I will get you out of his life. But you have to trust me. Because from this moment on, everything changes. From the beginning, Victoria sensed something was wrong with Michael. She was a mother, and a mother feels things. Behind a forced smiles and staged hugs, she She saw the emptiness in her son-in-law's eyes, a greedy emptiness. Michael didn't love Abigail, didn't love the boys. He loved only one thing: her money. Over time, he barely tried to hide it. He pretended to be a caring father, a model husband, but the mask slipped more and more often. And Victoria, always observant, began to notice how he avoided eye contact when talking about family, how annoyed he got spending time with the children, how he rushed to leave under any pretext. But Abigail saw nothing, blinded by love, believing his every word. The longer it went on, the deeper she sank, until something serious happened, and Victoria knew it was time to act. "Do you remember the day Kyle got sick and ended up in the hospital?" Victoria asked, sitting beside her daughter. Abigail nodded. "Of course. I was terrified. That wasn't an accident, nor negligence. I found out. Michael gave him spoiled food. On purpose." Abigail's eyes widened. "No. You're mistaken, Mom. He would never." "He would, and he did. And he would have done worse if I hadn't uncovered everything, Abigail. He wanted to see you all in a casket that would have been sealed forever." Abigail clutched her head, too much to process. Victoria continued, "He has a mistress, Cynthia. Younger, well-kept, spends time in salons and gyms. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but she knew exactly what she wanted. Your fortune." "He told me he didn't like women who show off," Abigail whispered. Victoria smirked. "He said that because he was keeping one hidden. They've been together for months. And they planned everything. He said he was tired of playing the good guy, that he wanted to live off your money, that you and the children were a burden." Abigail closed her eyes, holding back a sob. Victoria squeezed her hand. "I heard everything with my own ears. I hid near the veranda. He didn't know I was there. Why didn't you tell me?" Abigail cried, jumping up. "Why didn't you tell me right away?" "Because you wouldn't have believed me. You would have called me crazy. And you know how I know that? Because you already did when I tried to warn you. You turned away." Abigail fell silent. Her mother was right. "I had to protect you, myself, and my grandchildren. The only way was to make you die before he killed you for real." Abigail covered her face with her hands, shaking. "Remember the drink I gave you at the birthday party?" Victoria asked. "I remember. It contained a substance developed with the help of a doctor friend of mine. It slowed your pulse so much you appeared dead. But it was just a deep sleep. And after that, everything was prepared: the nurse, the guard at the cemetery, every detail." Abigail shook her head in disbelief. "You drugged me. Buried me. All part of a plan?" "Yes. Because the alternative was worse. You would have been truly dead because of him." Abigail cried silently. Victoria approached with the phone in her hand. "And now I have proof. I installed hidden cameras in the house as soon as I left. I knew he'd bring his mistress over. Knew he'd celebrate your death. And it all happened exactly like that." She pressed play. Footage of Michael and Cynthia laughter, kisses, toasts, mocking Abigail's and the children's deaths. And the confession. "I would have gotten rid of her myself if she hadn't died first. Now I'm free," he said. Victoria finished, "There's the truth." Abigail, stunned, collapsed onto the couch, eyes red, breathing ragged. "I don't believe it. I gave him 12 years of my life." Victoria sat beside her and hugged her gently. "And now you will get revenge." Abigail lifted her face. "What are we going to do?" "You're going to give him the biggest scare of his life, and show him that he who digs a grave for others might end up in it himself." Abigail wiped her tears, took a deep breath, and nodded. "Let's destroy that lowlife." A little later, she went to the room where the boys were. They jumped up, overjoyed. "Are you not fighting with Grandma anymore?" asked Kyle. "Not anymore, sweetie. Now we're okay. And ready for the second part of the mission." Kevin's eyes widened. "Second part? What is it?" Abigail smiled. "To scare Dad." "How?" Kyle laughed. Victoria entered the room and added, "Since you died, now you're ghosts. And ghosts can scare anyone they want. And guess who our target will be?" The boys exchanged excited glances. "Dad!" They both shouted together. They laughed merrily. Abigail was moved by their lightness, even amid such pain. She knew their father had never been good with them, always cold, sometimes even aggressive. But she hadn't suspected he had already hurt them, physically and emotionally, always secretly, always threatening them not to tell their mother. Now, everything was about to change. The hooded men appeared with makeup and costumes. They applied makeup with brushes to the faces of the three, making them pale like ghosts. They dressed them in thin white clothes that Victoria had brought. Everything was ready. The hour of reckoning had arrived. The show Michael would never forget was about to begin. Without wasting time, everyone got into the van. Abigail sat the boys in the back seat, while Victoria sat next to the hooded driver. The plan was set. It was time to show Michael the price of every lie, the price of every evil deed. The journey passed in silence. Abigail stared out the window at the road, her heart pounding. Victoria held one of her daughter's hands tightly, while Kevin and Kyle exchanged curious glances, excited about the upcoming mission. When they arrived at Abigail's old house, they entered through the back. The lights were on, music played loudly, and soon they saw Michael and Cynthia through the living room window, dancing together, twirling and laughing as if they owned the world. They jumped, clinked wine glasses, and shouted words of celebration. "Now we can live. Everything is ours, my love. Everything that was hers is now ours," Michael said, smiling like a madman. Abigail froze, watching the scene with a mix of anger, disgust, and sadness. Victoria took the boys a different way, preparing them for the right moment. Abigail wanted to watch a little longer. She felt she hadn't seen everything yet. And she was right. In the midst of the fun, Michael spun Cynthia around by the hands and, laughing, said, "Did you know that her ex, the boy's biological father, died because of me?" Cynthia stopped. "What?" "I tampered with his brakes a bit. Made him disappear even before she knew about the pregnancy. Best thing I ever did, besides, of course, having to raise those insolent brats." Abigail clapped her hands over her mouth, a cry of pain and fury escaping her. At that exact moment, Michael stopped dancing and turned around. There she stood, by the window, dressed in white, face pale, hair loose like a ghost's, her gaze piercing him. "Aya!" Michael jumped back, dropping his glass. Cynthia screamed too and hid behind him, trembling. Abigail vanished in the same instant, running towards the side of the house. Children's laughter echoed. A few seconds later, the man was trembling like a leaf. Did you see that?" he asked, turning to Cynthia. She nodded, terrified. "Yes. She was there. It was Abigail." Michael rushed to the window, breathing heavily, looked around, nothing, no trace. But suddenly, a voice called out, "Dad." It was Kevin. He ran through the hall, laughing as if playing tag. Cynthia screamed, clinging to Michael. "It's her son! It's her son!" Michael stammered. They're all dead? This can't be happening." From the other side of the house, hiding behind a door, Kyle looked at his grandmother. "Grandma, who's that woman with him?" Victoria smiled. "A minor character, my dear, in the mission." "And is she scared?" he asked with interest. "Very. So now it's your turn. Run over there." Kyle dashed out, darted through the hall like a shadow, laughing deliberately. He found his brother, and both started making faces and singing in thin voices, "Daddy, we're back." Michael fell to the floor, crawling, eyes wide. "Get away! Leave me alone, you monsters!" But the boys only laughed. The man had always called the children monsters, cornered and scared them, but now it was their turn to scare him. Both disappeared into the corridors. Cynthia turned pale, trembling like a leaf. "What's happening, Michael?" "This house. It's cursed." The man was drenched in cold sweat, trying to appear calm. "There's something in this house. A curse." "I don't know. We need to get out of here. Sell it. Leave." But just then, Abigail reappeared at the same window. "Michael," she uttered in a sinister whisper. "You can try to run, you can try to hide, but I will follow you wherever you go. Because you won't get rid of me." Michael screamed, covering his face with his hands. "Disappear. Leave me alone." Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Silence fell. Michael slowly got up and looked through the peephole. It's MS. Victoria. "It's her, my mother-in-law," he said nervously. "Go to the room, quickly." Cynthia resisted. "No way. Am not staying alone." "Never." "Now. I command you. Quickly." She ran to the room, still shaking. Michael opened the door, pale, sweating. "Good evening," Victoria said in a calm tone. "Is everything all right? You look nervous." Michael tried to hide it, but his voice trembled. "No, just tired." At that moment, Abigail appeared behind her mother, with the same ghostly expression, her eyes gleaming with restrained fury. The man screamed again, taking 2 steps back. "Get out! Go away! Go away!" Victoria turned and looked directly at her daughter, then turned back to Michael. "Who do you see?" "There's no one here." "She's there. Your daughter." She came back from hell. Watch how you speak of my daughter, Michael. There is no one here, Victoria insisted. You're not well. I know the loss was hard, but you need to calm down. She's there. She'll come for me. Abigail continued to stare intently, a smile playing on her lips. Her gaze was calm but full of pain. Her face was still pale from the makeup. The effect was terrifying. Victoria pretended not to understand anything. You need rest. You're unwell. Michael stammered, not knowing if he was going crazy. His head spun. And why are you here? I didn't call anyone. Of course you did. You sent me a message, said it was urgent. I don't know. He no longer knew what was real and what was false. Meanwhile, in the room, Cynthia tried to hide under the bed, huddled, hands over her mouth, trying not to breathe. But she didn't know the twins were nearby. Kevin and Kyle approached silently, carefully opened the door, slowly entered, looking around as if hunting. They stopped by the bed, leaned down together, and said in unison, "Found you." Cynthia screamed in desperation, hitting her head trying to get out, fell, got tangled in the sheets, tripped over her own feet. "Leave me alone. You're ghosts." The boys laughed, satisfied. Cynthia ran panicked through the corridors, stumbling, nearly falling, her face white with terror. The twins' screams echoed behind her, interspersed with ghostly laughter, like something from a nightmare. "We're gonna get you,"